All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm back. All right, we're going to be doing graphing exponential functions, but now we're going to graph them a little bit differently. Before we used the input-output table, now we're going to graph using A, B, H, and K. Okay? So in order to do this, it's very important that we understand this idea of our beginning points. We're calling them reference points. So if you recall, we always want to start with some type of points. So the first point we want to start with when we have an exponential function, when our power is a variable like this one, is 0, 1. That's going to be our starting point. The next one is going to be 1, B. B stands for the guy being raised to the power. So whatever your B value is, it'll be raised to the power. Also recall that our asymptote is now going to be our K value. So our K value is the guy that's adding or subtracting at the end, okay? He's our asymptote. You should be comfortable with this idea already. Domain and range, you can look here, but you should know how to figure out domain and range based off a graph. Okay, and we'll talk about end behavior later, so don't worry about end behavior now. So let's get into graphing using A, B, H, and K. Okay, so as a reminder, when we have our exponential function, our A value is always going to be the guy multiplying with our B value. Sometimes it's in parentheses, sometimes it's outside parentheses, okay? Our H value is adding or subtracting to our exponent x. Our K value is adding and subtracting outside of parentheses. Hopefully this is bringing back some memories. Our B value is the guy being raised to the x power. Okay? Also recall that your A value controls vertical stretch or compression. To use the A value, we always want to multiply with your Y values. And last but not least, if you have a negative A value, it's a vertical flip or a reflection across the x-axis. Okay, your B value here is actually your base. All we have to be concerned about with our B value is what we talked about before. If it's bigger than 1, it's a growth function. If it's between 0 and 1, it's a decay function. All right, your H moves left and right. Remember, it's always the opposite direction of the sign that you have in your function. So if it's negative, you move in a positive direction. If your H up here is positive, you move in a negative direction. I'll show you what that looks like, but the most important part here is how does it affect my original points? You add or subtract your H to your X value of your original points. And last but not least, our K translates up or down or shifts up and down, and we find our K at the end of our function equation here of add or subtract. We do not switch signs here, and you add or subtract K from your Y value. Okay, so these are the rules. Hopefully they're bringing back some memories. Let's go ahead and do an example. All right, so let's graph example A. I've also copied and pasted the steps here. If you need to reference, I will be referencing this portion here. So first thing we see is that I do have an exponential function. Because my B value is bigger than 1, I know this is a growth function. So that means it's going to move away from the asymptote. So the first thing I want to do before I even start doing anything is I want to draw in my asymptote. So my K value is going to give me my asymptote. So let's put that in purple. So my asymptote will be positive 1. Okay, there's my asymptote. Next thing we want to do is I want to start putting my original points, my reference points. If you recall, your first reference point is 0, 1. Your next reference point is going to be 1, comma, whatever my b value is. So let's look at our function. My b value is 2. Okay, so these are my original points. We're now going to use these to get 2 final points. But before I do, I need to know my a value. We already know my b value. I also need to know my h value and my k value. And we get these from our equation. So our a value is always going to be the guy that's multiplying to our b value. In this case, it's outside parentheses. So my a value is -3. My h value is adding and subtracting to my x, which is this guy up here. And the equation is -2, but my true a value, I have to switch the sign. So it's +2. And then my k value, which we already referenced, is 1. We do not switch that sign. It's 1. Okay, so now let's look at what we do. We always want to start with our a value first. So our a value, since it's bigger than 1, remember, ignore the signs. So ignore the sign for now. A is bigger than 1. So we're going to have a vertical stretch, and because it's negative, we're also going to have a reflection across the x-axis. Okay, so it's going to go upside down around the x-axis. How do I affect my original points? You're going to take your a value and multiply with your y values. So it's going to look like this. I'm going to multiply my a value with my y values. So I'm multiplying here by -3. Okay, so what's 1 times -3? 0, -3. What's 2 times -3? That's 1 times, or 1, -6. So we are done with the a value. These are my new points. Now I'm just going to apply the h and k. Because the h is +2, that means I'm moving to the right, because I've already switched the sign. So I'm moving to the right twice, a shift twice. K is +1, that means I'm going to shift up. So how do I affect my graph? Your h will add or subtract, depending on sign, with the x value. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to add or subtract to the x values here. So my h is going to add 2, because it's +2. And my k value is going to add or subtract to my y value, which is these guys here. So my y value is, my k value is +1. Okay, and just do this math, and this will give you your final points that we will plot. 0 plus 2, 2. -3 plus 1, -2. 1 plus 2, 3. -6 plus 1, -5. So these guys here are my original final, my final points. So let's plot them. So 2, -2 is here. And 3, -5 is here. 3, -5. Okay, and with the idea that we've done before, these 2 points, I'm going to connect them. All right, so if I connect them, you can see that it has to get close to the asymptote. So there is my sketch. Okay, and we are done sketching. So this is using A, B, H, and K to graph. Let's try another example. All right, first thing I want to do is find my K value, which is -4. So that's going to be my asymptote. So put a line at -4. Okay, can't cross that or touch it. So now I want to put down my original points, which hopefully you need to memorize. Is going to be 0, 1, and then 1 comma b. So if you look, my b value in this case is 1/3. All right, so instead of b, we're going to put 1/3. All right, next thing we want to do is label my a, h, and k. So my a value can be found in the front because it's multiplying with my b value. That's 3. My h value adds or subtracts with the x value in exponent form here. So that's positive 2 in the equation. But remember, when we get our true h value, we switch the sign. It's now negative 2. And then our k value, we've talked about already, is negative 4. So real quick, before we start applying this, let's understand what's happening. Since the a value is 3, that's going to give me a vertical stretch of 3, okay? And it's positive, so there's no reflections. My h value, negative 2, means I'm going to move to the left twice. So I'm shifting or translating left twice. And negative 4k value means I'm going to shift down 4 times, okay? So now let's apply what we know. Our a value, if you look at our reference up here, our a value will multiply with our y values in our original points. So a is going to multiply with our y. So it's going to be times 3 for our y values. Okay, so let's do that. That gives me 0, 3, 1, comma. Now, 1/3 times 3, that actually gives you 3/3. And if you clean this up, 3/3, that turns into 1. So it turns into 1 here. Okay, so I'm going to trust that you understand this calculation here. Not use your calculator. All right, so our a value is done. Now we need to apply my h and k. The h, if you look at our reference up here, our h is going to add or subtract to the x value, which are these guys, and our k is going to add or subtract to our y values, which is this guy. So h, we're subtracting 2 from our x's, and our k is subtracting 4 from our y's. And once we do that, we get our final points. So we're going to have negative 2, comma, negative 1. And this is going to be negative 1, comma, negative 3. Okay, these are our final points, so let's plot them. Negative 2, comma, negative 1. Negative 2, negative 1 is here. And then we have negative 1, negative 3 here. So if we use our asymptote, we should have a function like this. And this function is going to be dk because it's 1/3 is our b value, less than 1. Okay, let's go ahead and do this example. Add this to your notes. All right. So we have this function we want to graph. We're going to graph in the same process as we've done before. So let's start with our asymptote. Our asymptote is the k value, negative 4. So let's put that in. All right, and now let's put in our original points, which we have memorized as 0, 1, and then 1, comma, b. All right, so if you look at our equation, our b value is actually the number e. So 1, comma, b is actually going to be the e value. All right, and here's what we have to understand. None of the procedural part's going to change. We're going to do everything exactly the same. The only thing we have to remember is that e, it has a kind of a weird decimal value. So I'm going to put that up at the top. So we know e is really equal or approximately equal. So we're going to put this. This just means kind of equal to 2.71. okay? But for our calculation, we don't need that specific, so I'm not even gonna put the 1. We're gonna just use 2.7 for E. So if you think about it, instead of putting E here, even though that's my base, I'm gonna put its approximate value. So let's plug in 2.7 here. And we do the same process as we've done before. Okay, so our A value, if you look up here, is going to be 3, which is a vertical stretch. Our H value, we flip the sign. So in the equation as positive 1, it's going to be negative 1 here. So we go left 1 time, and then our K value is equal to negative 4. Okay, so that means we're going to shift down 4. All right, let's go ahead and do this. Recall the A value multiplies with the Y's. So we will have 0, 3 here, and 1, 8.1. All right, now let's go ahead. Our H adds to the X's or subtracts to the X's. Our K adds or subtracts to the Y's. So we're gonna have negative 1 there for the X's and negative 4 for the Y's. So our final points would be negative 1, negative 1, and 0, 4.1. So let's plot that, negative 1, negative 1, and then 0, 4.1. It should be up here. And then let's go ahead and graph them. And we have a growth function. It's growth because remember, E is actually bigger than 1. So notice the procedure didn't change, it's just our B value is a decimal, it's 2.7.